Okay, I'm making this video in reference to the Cornwallis statue removal in Halifax and the utter ridiculousness of what prompted its removal. And that ridiculous move is that the native peoples became upset that the Halifax Council has done absolutely nothing to form any form of committee to do any sort of actions or make any sort of decisions regarding the status of this statue. So, to placate everybody, they just boom, pop the statue up and put it into storage. Now, what this action has done is that it sets a very dangerous precedent that somebody can say something and what they say can cause, or what isn't done can cause an action such as this complete removal of something of historical significance so quickly. Now, this action was done because the council didn't do anything in the first place to correct the issue with the native peoples. There was no discussions, and I can understand completely why the native people are upset. General Cornwallis was involved with ordering the murder and the scalping of many, many native peoples in the province, but that was close to 300 years ago, and that was not specific to this area, nor was it specific to General Cornwallis. Scalping was an action that's been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years during war times. It's been known to even occur up until Vietnam, and possibly in other regions today, but we're just not being told. Now, it makes you wonder why they chose General Cornwallis in specific, and the scalping specifically of the Nova Scotia natives, as such a high crime that this statue has to be removed, when there's other people in history that have done way more, much more offensive, to much more larger areas, and over much longer time periods. Now, if they're going to talk of horrific things that occurred in Nova Scotia, why aren't we talking about Grand Prix and the expulsion of the Acadians, where thousands upon thousands were loaded onto ships and sent to who knows where? How come nothing's being done to address that? Where's the outcry about that? Well, I can understand why there's no outcry, because the French people in this province are a strong people. They understand that the past is the past, and they dwell on living for the present and the future. Now, in retrospect, I've looked around online in several places to find out where the origin of this hatred for Cornwallis sprang from, and the earliest I can find is last year, when a native lady came from BC. As far as I understand, she has no connection with Nova Scotia. She has no ancestors here. She is not from here. That she came straight to Nova Scotia and joined the protests and started the havoc regarding this statue, which I find is very, very strange why somebody would do that, especially when their tribe has nothing to do with Nova Scotia, is actually from British Columbia. If you think about it, in the long term, the ramifications from the removal of Cornwallis and calling him racist, bigoted, murderer, and such against the native peoples of Nova Scotia is going to be a logistical nightmare. The alteration of business names, street names, religious building names, etc., etc., right down the line, everything's going to have to be changed on maps, any sort of government forms, documents. It's going to have to be relisted in the phone books. This is eventually what's going to happen with the atmosphere and of this sort of thing that is pervaded elsewhere. And it's a very slippery slope till eventually they actually do go for places such as Grand Prix, the history of the South Shore, maybe Even as ridiculous as it sounds, our lighthouses, even our literary figures of historical importance, such as Sam Slick and Thomas Chandler Halliburton. It's time that people read about this stuff, get educated on this stuff, and start speaking their voice about it. Instead of removing the statue completely, what they could have done instead was speak about alterations to the statue, specifically to the plaque and the information regarding his negative accomplishments as well as his positive achievements, such as development of the infrastructure of Nova Scotia, the fighting of many wars, being one of the only successful military leaders in all of history to invade the United States and burn down the White House. Those are things that are being left out in favor of fury based upon one aspect. And the people who feed those fires of fury based upon one aspect, they should be questioned. They should be asked what their motive is, and people should be very, very leery of people who have a motive where their wish is to cause fights. Now, instead of picking on a statue from history, why don't they go back to the Canadian Holocaust, where Native children were yanked from their homes and placed in these Catholic and government-sponsored places where there was abuse, rape, and neglect,